Hi, welcome back to another video. I am Ramona, and this video is going to be about meeting someone from a past life, a topic that honestly fascinates me, because I do believe most people have had, I do believe most people have had past life experiences. Now, whether that's they've actually lived it or they're just picking up on energy or emotions, it's an empathic kind of thing. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but I do find it fascinating. And so that's what today's video is about. So here we go. Ready? I'm going to describe something that's happened to me twice in my life, and I'd like to know if anyone's ever experienced this. So first, I am all of 34 years old, and I've met thousands of people in my life. So it's a very rare thing that I am talking about. First time it happened was with a girl. We were both in a store, and she saw me first. I noticed her staring at me, and this very, very weird feeling came over me. It's hard to explain. I knew she was a stranger, but at the same time, I did know her. It was like a very distant feeling, but I felt it. Then we both smiled like we were seeing an old friend, and we talked for a while about our lives and basically everything about ourselves that we could think of. And then there was a moment when I was like, reality hit us hard, both at the same time. She teared up and gave me a hug, and I remember saying, "Yeah, it was really good meeting you." And she said, "Yeah." And then I said, "I guess I'll see you around." And I don't remember her response, but I've never seen her again. The second time was at a park. It was a guy this time. We noticed each other at the same time and smiled almost to the point of laughing, at least for my part. Like with the girl, I don't know him, but I got the same distant feeling. And like with the girl, we told each other about our lives and talked for a long time about things ranging from our childhoods to where we were now. I don't remember how we parted, but I do remember reality setting in the way it did with the girl, and then things becoming a little awkward. I also don't remember how we parted. Now, for the record, I did consider the possibility that even these were childhood friends or something, and they recognized me and I simply didn't recognize them. I genuinely had never met these people in my life. All you can do is believe me when I say that. As I'm writing this, I also think maybe some will think I'm nuts and struck up conversations with strangers in an overly friendly way, and they just kind of went along with it. But that's not the case, and I have no way to prove it. So basically, I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I'm curious if anyone else has experienced this before. So now we're going to get into the other stories. Ready? Number 2. Thank you for posting. I had the same feeling when my nephew was born, not with my nieces, just the nephew. Another person says, I was sitting next to this lady I did not know on a flight once. We talked about all kinds of stuff, and we ended up discussing reincarnation for some reason. She told me about this random but deeply meaningful encounter she had had with an unfamiliar woman on a city street somewhere. They both somehow recognized each other spontaneously, hugged, said great to see you, and then went their separate ways, never to meet again. Her story made an impression on me. Who knows, right? That's true. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I have this feeling with my son. I have 2 young kids, and I love them both equally so very much. But I've always felt a familiar connection to my youngest. One day I said to him, he's 2, I'm so glad we're together again. The words just came out. He looked at me, smiled, and gave me a hug. And someone replied with, that's so interesting. I believe in past lives, and I think children sometimes still have their past life memories. Me too. My kids have told me about their memories they've had from before. Next story was, we were traveling through Kentucky once, so naturally we had to eat at Kentucky Fried Chicken. While we sat there and ate, my husband, our kid, and myself, our kid suddenly looked at some random guy across the restaurant, and I said that the guy was his dad. He looked nothing like my husband, his dad, at all, who was literally sitting next to our kid. He said it more than once, but couldn't say anything more than just that. So this random guy is his dad. It was weird. Yep. My daughter has told me her whole life, she's 16, that this is the first life where she's been the daughter. She's always been my mother in every single one of our past lives. That's kind of cool. It's interesting how the family connections stay. I've got personal experience with that too, if you want to believe that. When I first met the person I considered my brother, I felt like we hadn't seen each other in such a long time. When I left after the first meeting, I said it was good seeing him again before I could stop myself, since we had just been working together in his shop, and I told him the story of how weird it was that he said that even though it was the first time we'd met him, He echoed my sentiments that it had felt like a long time since we had been there with each other, and how we must have had a connection from another time. To this day, he's still my brother, and I consider him part of my family, even if it may be only a soul connection and not physically familial. And someone replied with, "That's incredible. This is my first time telling anyone about it, and it's also the first time anyone's confirmed that it's a thing that others have also experienced. It's so surreal and amazing. I've heard of past lives, but I've never seen anyone talk about meeting people from past lives. I'm happy it's not just me." I think that's a very shared experience. People have these things and they don't necessarily want to talk to them because most people will think they're crazy or making it up, or, oh, you just want to feel special or whatever. But no, there are definitely times when there's more to it. There really is. Next story. I have a very similar experience. When I was 25, I met a girl randomly in a park, and I was sometimes went to clear my head. The moment I saw her, I knew that I knew this person, and it felt like I'd met her, one of my really close friends that I'd known since I was 5. Yet I have no memory of who she is or what her name is. Naturally, though, I went up to her. She seemingly recognized me as well, and we had a talk. Just like with our encounters, we would talk about our childhoods and everything leading up to this point, basically. This all happened in the most natural way until I had to just address the elephant in the room, and I asked her if I know her or where I know her from. She smiled and told me that she was asking herself the same question. We basically inquiring where we might have met before, but quickly came to the conclusion that we must be total strangers. She only recently moved to my country back then, and when I met her, it was the first week here. She'd also never been on a vacation here or ever been in the country. I'd never been to her country. It was the most bizarre thing. Eventually, we gave up, said goodbye to each other, and again, like old besties would do, and I went back attending some business. I never met her again. I also once met a dog, yes, an animal. And a few years after this happened in the middle of the jungle somewhere in Peru, we got lost, and the instant I saw this dog, I somehow knew that it was my grandfather, who was dead almost 25 years at this point, of whom I literally have zero memories of interacting with. It was at the same feeling as the girl, only it was additional, I knew it was him. The dog walked with me for a bit over 5 hours and told me and led me to the nearest town. I had no food on me or anything. I could have fed him, yet he stayed with me the entire trip. The moment we arrived, he would come up to me, expect me to pet him, lick my hand, and then he'd run off, never to be seen again. My entire life I have lived in this sort of academic fool where I only believed in the physical and what I could see. I studied math and IT, dabbled a bit into physics, and generally considered everything a bit more of the woo side of things as utter nonsense. Experience like this have since made me change my worldview drastically, and I can nowadays honestly say that I know nothing truly at all. Life seems far more crazy than I ever could have imagined. I've since had other unexplainable experiences that really make me consider reincarnation as a very real phenomenon, but it would take too long to type it all out. Anywho, thanks for posting. It's always nice to read up on experiences just like these and wonder. Yeah. I'm glad to see you have a little bit of an open mind. I'm willing to, you know, accept new possibilities. Most people should do that. Hope they do. Next story. I had this happen to me. I'm 50 now, but when I was about 16 or 17, my group of friends met up at the apartment of one of our friends. Friend lived there with his mom and older brother. As soon as I met the older brother, I got an overwhelming feeling that I knew him before, and it wasn't a good feeling. It's just being around him made me extremely uncomfortable, and I couldn't stop glancing at him, thinking I knew him from somewhere. I've never had this feeling around anyone else I've ever met, but it was strange and a bit unnerving. After all this time, I can clearly remember the initial feelings of familiarity and nervousness. All of us kind of kept in touch over the 40 years, and I moved out of state over 20 years ago. I have seen this person when I've been at home to visit and still get that same unsettling feeling when I've run into them. See, I like this story because most of the time, you hear about the positive, oh, it was an old friend, an old family member, whatever. But what if the reverse is true? What if you meet someone who in a past life was really, you two did not get along, or they hurt you, or you hurt them, or, there was some kind of not great experience? That's an interesting one. I like that one. On to the next one, though. A few years ago, I went to a weekend with my best friend in a beautiful countryside house to meet up with some other people she barely knew. It was quite random, but the theme of the weekend was to spend some time in nature and reconnect. Not really convinced, but okay, why not? Except my best friend, I knew none of the people present, and she had previously only seen and talked to two of them out of the total 12 guests. Upon arrival, one woman immediately triggered something in me. Hard to describe it. It was feelings between surprise, familiarity, and sudden pure well-being. We looked at each other quite intensely and could not help but smile. I remember being quite confused about this sensation. It was so disturbing that the same evening I tried voicing this event to my best friend, but I was lacking words. The next day, I met the woman in question in the kitchen. I remember so vividly this moment. We looked again at each other very intently, hesitating but smiling, and spoke at the same time. "We know each other, right?" We laughed, like two friends finding each other again, and tried to remember where from, but absolutely nothing was coming from the same background. Life lived so far in regions quite remote from each other, had no acquaintances in common, plus a 30-year gap between us. We felt the need to hug several times that weekend, and no words were needed. We were simply looking deeply into each other's eyes and smiled stupidly. I can't explain it better. It was evidence that we knew each other from before. But before what? No idea. It was such a strong, unique feeling. I have a similar thing happen to me back in my early 20s. I was working the afternoon shift at the bar, and it was pretty slow. A group of ladies came in, and one of them came up to the bar to order drinks for the table. After the usual small talk, she asked if I believed in reincarnation, because she was sure that she knew me, not from this life. At this time, I was a little too shy and unsure of myself to say yes, so I offered up past jobs, places I've lived, and tried to find a crossover. She was kind and didn't push the subject. I had a weird gut feeling that I would see her again, so wasn't too worried about brushing it off. I never did see her again, though, and looking back, I think the gut feeling was because I knew her on some level. I now wish I could have a do-over of that conversation and find out more. Well, coulda, woulda, shoulda. You never know, When it takes you by surprise, it's kind of a shock. You never know exactly what you want to do or how you want to handle things. Hindsight is always 2020. Remember that. When I first met my husband, we walked as if we had met before. We talked as if we met. We asked if we had ever met before and maybe didn't remember each other. He felt that he had met me before, and we spent hours talking and never separated after meeting for the first time. We were engaged a month later and married within a year of meeting each other. We do tell everyone that we are soulmates. Been married 34 years. One other time, I met someone at training at work, and we just talked about everything and nothing at all and laughed. And I finally asked if we had met and were friends when we were little. We both felt the same way. We had never met before. I felt so comfortable and still want to spend time with her. It's like I miss her. It's so weird, and I can't explain it. That's good though. Some of us have had many lives here on Earth, and yes, I believe these kinds of encounters, just briefly, but heartwarming. Everyone here on Earth has their own blueprints to finish up whatever homework before pointing back to the source, universe. This brief encounter should means both of you don't have karma's relations. If you are, you will meet them again. After we have done our homework here on Earth, when we return, we will see them again. Treasure this life, embrace love, and give out and love unconditionally. Part of the great lesson is to learn here. We may or may not have had the chance to be born again here, as global birth rates are falling. Everyone that we meet in our lives has meaning, whether people who love us or hate us, cheats on us. The list goes on. They are whom we plan for our whole blueprints before we are born here. Embrace them, as every encounters have a lesson for us to learn. Put away those hatreds of people who have hurt us. Forgive them and let go. Thank them for the valuable lessons they have taught us. Move on. Believe in your own sixth sense. Usually they are our higher selves trying to protect us or warn us if we stray from our blueprint. Good luck and enjoy the journey here on Earth. So, I'm originally from India, and the custom of arranged marriages is fairly common. A man has come to my parents' place to see me. First time I saw him, I recognized with him the words of, "He's so dear." I never use words like dear. But the intense recognition made me believe that he means something very important to me. We have been happily married for 22 years now.
My husband did not feel this, is not into spirituality, but I know and love him from another life. That is so sweet. I like that one. I've heard of this kind of thing before and wonder if these people are part of our soul group or tribe. And although, hey, we have not agreed to be in each other's lives at this time around, we have, prior to being born, agreed to meet up just to check in on each other. I like that theory too, that, you have such a strong connection throughout your lives that you just want to go check up on some people. That's a cool theory. I like that one. I had an unexpected stare happen between a woman and I as I was standing in the doorway of my pot club many years ago. She and the rest of her crew, which was made up of Homeland Security, had parked one of their vehicles diagonally in the corner of the block. They were there at the liquor store next to us. I can't remember exactly where it was, what time, but the kids who were running the family store had done. She was standing there, and so was I. We locked onto each other without even realizing it. At first, I didn't realize what I was doing, and boom, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was staring at a Homeland Security officer without even realizing it. And she apparently was doing the exact same thing. I quickly composed myself by stopping myself from staring at her any longer, but I had this overwhelming feeling that I knew her, and I could swear she looked as dumbfounded as I felt. But we never spoke. Missed opportunity. But yeah, that's kind of an odd thing. How do you really go up and do that? That would be kind of awkward. I am envious of all of you because I have experienced this with someone, but she didn't recognize me. At first, I thought it was love at first sight, but it was something else. I did fall in love with her because she was a friend of a friend, and we met a few times, but somehow she didn't feel the same. Years later, I had a very vivid dream about a past life where we were lovers and we had a daughter. By then, she had moved abroad and got married. It's been 17 years, and I still think of her almost daily. I haven't felt the same spark with anyone else. I still wonder why she didn't have the same connection. That one's a good one. Randomly like that. I do have a few people in my life that I believe we have had other lives together some way. Where on meeting, getting to know them is more like getting caught up. We hit it off right away, and I genuinely feel like I've known them forever. It's not uncommon that people in our lives have been in our life before us. Kind of like school, going through the grades, the same classmates. Some of you may have become better friends with, others just acquaintances or simply aware of each other's existence. Maybe you parted ways, or you weren't meant to live this life experience together. Or maybe your paths will cross again later. If the experience stands out so strangely that it's your inkling, I am inclined to side with your intuition. Don't dismiss it, especially if it's kind of nagging about it. Which notion is stronger, forgotten childhood friends or friends from a past life? That's a very good question. Hey, if you are enjoying this video, would you mind liking or subscribing, or maybe even leaving a comment? I would appreciate it. But back to the stories. Back in my home country, I took part in some psychedelic circles that used, oh goodness, I can't even pronounce that. Ayahuasca? I don't know what that is. Although a very dear friend of mine, and one of those occasions I met a guy and I instantly knew that we used to be best friends or brothers. I don't know. It was like I knew him very deeply and we hit it off. He was again one of my best friends. And one day after a very intense session, I told him, hey man, you and I were really good friends in another life. He laughed. He said, yeah, I know. We used to have very long hair. It was a funny comment because I'm bald now and he did have a lot of hair. Those connections are real, my friend. Also, I speak of him in past tense because sadly he passed away. I was extremely sad when I got the news, and oftentimes I remember him dearly, but during the time of his passing, I had the urge for saying to this guy, really, dude, you had to go like that and leave me here. I laughed to myself in a way. I know that I will see him again. When I was traveling from Manchester, England, back to the States, I struck up a convo with a guy in front of me in line. I felt like I knew him and we were just catching up. We were boarding the plane and I saw that I was sitting next to the guy who gave me a really creepy smile. He switched my ticket and said, I've still got you. And I never saw him again. Even after leaving the plane, I think about that all the time. That's kind of cool. I think there are people that reappear in our lives, sometimes a fleeting past like you've experienced, and also long-lasting relationships. When you see one you've been close with from another era, you recognize them. I've always believed my dad and I were childhood buddies at one point in time. I was lucky to have him again as my dad. Occasionally, you'll become friends with someone and it clicks so easily and quickly. I think that has an influence from previous times as well. Just my thoughts. The first time me and my hubs got a photo of the other, we had deja vu, feeling that we had known each other before. We immediately started dating at 14 and 15 and have been together for 10 years now in April. We both talk about the otherworldly feelings that we've had when we both laid eyes on each other. He actually had a premonition dream of me when he was a little boy, and that same dream played out exactly in real life. My aunt is a very good palm reader, and she read my hand against my will and found that I would be with one person for a very long time. We were the only ones in our family who have been together from teenagers to adults. Our relationship has lasted longer than my mother's-in-law's 3 first marriages combined. The soul connection I feel to this person is like the creation of the universe. It's always there and unexplainable. That's quite beautiful. And I'm glad you have that. That is a great story, a great connection. When my wife and I were dating, we met for lunch at a chain Italian restaurant. Big booths, red and white table, checkercloth. So it was lunchtime, so the place was pretty empty. When the waiter came over, he and my wife immediately recognized each other. It went both ways. I wish I could remember how long they talked. We were both smiling and clearly happy to see each other. They spoke at length, catching up with each other in their lives. The only reason I remember this is that at some point they started talking about who they knew in common, and it was no one. It got real awkward. I think this is why I remember it. And it ended with smiles, but it was really odd because they both clearly felt a sense of intimacy. I can believe this because it has happened to me a few times. I have met people who felt like I have known them forever. There is one particular guy I met at work who is much older than me, but I feel like I have known him at some part in my past life, and that's how close I felt. He doesn't reciprocate, though, and since we both have our own family and kids, we don't really delve into it much, as we are just friends. I say this about that particular person as no matter what I feel close to him, I don't even talk to him for years and still feel the same way. Oh, it's kind of sad. That I don't know that I've ever felt that whole feel like you have a connection to somebody, but they don't feel the same. I don't know, because a lot of my past life experience thingies have honestly come to me in dreams, and I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's just a dream, but they really weren't. For my part, I have several sisters. One I've known a very long time. She's been my sister in at least one other life. My son was actually my brother and the same life with my sister. And I've shared other experience with my son, and he has with me, ones I've forgotten. He would tell me about it. So he and I have crossed paths many times. They're just cool. So far, none of them have been negative or bad. But I always remark to my husband, he doesn't really necessarily believe in this stuff, but I was like, I've never met you before. This is the first time I've ever had any connection with my husband, which is probably why we don't get along. No, I'm joking. Probably why we butt heads so much. We don't have a past there. But it is interesting how there's people. I know another situation. There's 4 brothers that my family kind of grew up with, this same small town, and I've known them. I don't know how. I don't know where. I don't know all of it, but they have been a part of my lives for many, many times, many connections, and they're in at least from my point of view, they're always brothers. So that's interesting. I do love stories like this. I'll probably keep doing some about this because I do honestly enjoy them. But I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say. So spike a comment down there and go watch another video, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.